The most popular place in Marrakesh is of course the Jebel El Fna. Every other show will show you that, but we're showing it to you for a different reason. The really popular place in Jebel El Fna is the Argana Cafe, which overlooks the square. And I've gone there for, I hate to say it, about 60 years now, would you believe? I always go to the same table and the same chair when I overlook the square. And in 2011, a decade ago, a terrorist came to this place, sat in my chair in the exact same place in the cafe, and exploded a bomb, killing 25 people. Amazing and quite frightening when I saw it on the news.
Full of people, all alone. Roads full of houses, never home. Church full of singing, out of tune. Everyone's gone to the moon. Eyes full of sorrow, never wet. Hands full of money, all in debt. Sun coming out in the middle of June. Everyone's gone to the moon. Long time ago, life had begun. Everyone went to the sun. Hearts full of motors, painted green. Mouths full of chocolate, covered cream. Arms that can only lift a spoon. Everyone's gone to the moon. Everyone's gone to the moon. Everyone's gone to the moon.
I was watching the fantastic David Lean film from 1946 of Great Expectations the other day. I seriously think the first 45 minutes of that movie are perhaps the greatest ever made. But looking at some of the camera work in black and white then, it was fantastic. I've taken some photos myself over the years with my iPhone, and some of them I think have worked very well, such as the photographs of Rabat or Saleh years ago before developments happened, or others often by chance rather than by intention. But it is interesting, and it's a point I wanted to make, that this TV series you're watching, and I call it a TV series, is very much me with my one iPhone, nobody else, except the occasional bit of help from others, basically putting together half-hour shows again and again, and yet they look pretty good compared to other films made more recently. I think they stand up fine. Anyway, what do you think? Let me know. One of the hits I had in the 1970s was a huge holiday hit, as well as one that lasted all through the year. It sold several million copies and made the top 5 almost everywhere. Was absolutely massive, and I absolutely hated it. But it did sell very well. Originally by the George Baker selection, and I covered it, putting in that sort of step bass sound, dum 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 dum, which I must admit I borrowed from Nancy Sinatra, These Boots Are Made for Walking. Anyway, it was a huge hit, so what the hell, let's take a look at some holiday makers.
The sun shines on the mountains and the night is on the run. It's a new day, it's a new way, and I fly up to the sun. I can feel the morning sunlight, I can smell the new mown hay, I can hear God's voices calling for my golden skylight way. Una paloma blanca, I'm just a bird in the sky. Una paloma blanca, over the mountains I fly. No one can take my freedom away. Once
On a clear day, you can actually see the Atlas Mountains as though they were in touching distance. Actually, they are only about an hour away, and it's perfectly possible to be swimming all morning, and after an hour's drive, you're up at the top of the mountains at Kilometre, and you're skiing. The road out there is fabulous because very quickly after you leave the main city, you hit the suburbs and you see all the various things on the road, very Moroccan, going out to the suburbs. Bizarre statues of every kind and tree farms or tea factories, as many as 1,000 palm trees and different trees all growing there.
When the sun shines on the mountains and the night is on the run, it's a new day, it's a new way, and I fly up to the sun. Una paloma blanca, I'm just a bird in the sky. Una paloma blanca, over the mountains I fly. No one can take my freedom away.
Sex. Those of you who've read my books, and if you want to, you can get them and read them, will know all about my sex life. I was basically bisexual, and I discovered that at an early age. At Stoke House, when I was 10 or 11, my first sexual experience was with a boy called Nigel, same age as me, who has passed away since, so I can mention his name, and better photographs in the books. But then at the age of about 14 or 15, I saw the movie Victim, and to my horror, I realised that if you had a gay sex of any kind, it might lead to prison or even death. That absolutely horrified me, and it made no sense whatsoever. Why on earth were girls and women and females capable at the age of 16 to work out whether or not they wanted sex, yet people who were men and who were that same age were not able to do so until they were 21? Still makes no sense to me, just like the current law about victims who make allegations, quite often false, to the police and will be believed even if they are lying. That is official police notice. Anyway, I could make no sense of that, and I had constant and very satisfactory consensual relationships with people of the same gender as me and about the same age as me, all the way through school and university and all sorts of other places, and I considered them absolutely fine if both wanted it and enjoyed it, as everybody did in that era, I'm here to say. It started off with me being a big fan of musicals. When I was about 8 or 9, I used to go up to London and watch musicals like The King and I, My Fair Lady, Oklahoma, and my favourite was a musical called Kismet. I used to buy a ticket right up in the gods with my chin perched on the velvet, looking out at these musicals and thinking they were wonderful. And I bought the programme for Kismet, which featured a gorgeous lady called Laloum, who was the wife of the vizier, rather scantily clad, and I used to draw her for my own satisfaction. And the headmaster, Arthur Springrice Piper, found one of these drawings, summoned me to the studio and said to me, "Why are you not drawing pictures of men?" When I couldn't reply, he beat me soundly, which he often did. I noticed at the time that he always had one hand stuck in his pockets and was grunting throughout, and I never quite worked out why that was. Since then, of course, I put two and two together and realised the man was a pervert.
Who let the dogs out?
You was a fun spot. You was old, you was ugly, you was sweet like a pig. Take up your things and run. You're holding intelligent, ugly, so that bright.
It was breaking bad, it was bumping. Yippee-hi-yo. And everybody having a ball. Yeah, man. Yippee-hi-yo. Until the man lived out to them calling. Oh, yeah. Yippee-hi-yo. And every girl responded to their call. I hear one man shout out. Who let the dogs out? 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 There's every minute and the boy called a million bucks down. Castell, get back Fluffy, nice puppy, get back you flea-infested mongrel.
Yes, long before the Baha Men, I was the first to record that in a studio, Who Let the Dogs Out, many years ago. But to continue with my stories about the vile headmaster Arthur Springrice Piper at Stoke House School in Seaford, I suppose I was by the time I was about 12 or so, a new boy arrived, and one of the things we had to do every term, every week or so, was march in a crocodile down to Seaford and down across the sea, of course by the sea, and then back to the school, all dressed impeccably in our horrible little grey uniforms and grey shorts and white socks, and then march back to the school. And this was a matter of great pride for Headmaster Piper, seeing us all looking so neat and tidy. Well, this new boy, who was terrified by the whole thing, decided to shat himself. And indeed, brown diarrhoea trickled down his legs onto his white socks, which of course caused great hilarity amongst us cruel and horrible schoolboys. Piper, who went even whiter than usual, he looked like Dracula at the best of times, snapped at the boy, "You are a disgrace to the school. Fall back 10 yards and follow us, and the rest of you boys are not to look at him or speak to him or anything until we reach the school." Well, I thought this was incredibly cruel and nasty, so I fell back, put my arm around the boy's shoulders, which I have to say was not a very pleasant experience since the smell was appalling. And he said to me, "Won't you get beaten for this?" And I said, "Oh yes, but it happens all the time. He beats me, doesn't need an excuse to beat me. He's just a sadist and a horrible person, and I refuse to allow him to intimidate you. When you get back to school, go and see Matron. She'll clear you up and everything will be absolutely fine. Don't worry." Well, that to me symbolised Arthur Springrice Piper, who did indeed beat me when we got back to school, and I didn't give a shit. Morocco is no longer a third world country, as I've mentioned before. Indeed, it's now a first world country, and they have the most massive supermarkets with everything included available there, rather odd for a Muslim country, alcohol of all kinds, pork and ham, and all sorts of food, drink and appliances, as well as numerous designer label shops and stalls in other places, as well as keeping the traditional kind of look that Morocco has always had. I hope you're enjoying these VODDCASTS. I call them VODDCASTS, like podcasts, but with two Ds because it's odd. In fact, they are very, very odd indeed. And a V for video. As you may have noticed, it is partly visual. So this is me rambling on about various things, including the places I visited on this long tour. The Victim Bites Back, all the way from London through France and Spain to North Africa and back up through Europe. This is the first and only series of VODDCASTS. I've copyrighted the name, actually, because, VODDCASTS. That's something that we can all be proud of, can't we? Actually, of course, that is a lie. I haven't copyrighted the name at all. I've only just made up the name VODDCASTS. As you probably realise as I ramble on, I do lie a lot. Actually, I don't lie at all. What I do sometimes do is exaggerate. I colour things up a bit. And that is, after all, what the entire world does. The media does all the time. It colours up the facts and the realities. It exaggerates. It inflates to make it a better story. Because who wants to read just a boring story such as, I hate to mention it again, I'm not guilty? How boring is that? Whereas the other person making the false allegations can have much more fun saying the most appalling things. Of course, all the old souks and the Medina shops and everything remain the same throughout Morocco, but especially in Marrakesh. Walking through the squares and into the Medina under clear blue skies is always a pleasure wherever I am in Morocco, whether it's Marrakesh or anywhere else. Every now and then time seems to stand still. You're almost in a time machine here. One of the reasons I've chosen to do this journey, 10,000 kilometres in the car, is that it gives you time to think. I love travelling by car, just as I love swimming and walking. I also love taking trains, but I've gotten to hate air travel. Airports, security, take off your shoes, delays, that ghastly reprocessed air on the germ tubes. The journeys tend to be awful going to and from the airports. I did love Concorde. I took over 200 flights on Concorde. In the 20 years I was on it. It was magnificent. I'd leave my bedroom in London and arrive in my bedroom in New York at exactly the same time. It was terrific. So I used to travel probably twice a month for 20 years on Concorde. It started off with me only being able to afford the odd seat myself, but very quickly I found that others, such as record companies or TV companies or newspapers, were prepared to pay for me to have a first class or a business class ticket on British Airways or Air France, and I would always get automatically upgraded to Concorde because I was on it so often, eventually it got to the point where I had to buy my own ticket, and I used to buy the cheapest economy. You can only fly on the last Thursday of the month in the middle of the year kind of economy return ticket, and again got automatically upgraded. Having done over 300 flights, I was known as the most flown passenger on Concorde, beating David Frost, and I was always given the same seat in row A, lots of legroom there. I met fascinating people on it. I once sat next to Rupert Murdoch for an entire flight. He left his wife in the next seat and came and sat next to me, and we chatted for a long time. An absolutely charming, intelligent, very funny man, I found. And I remember once sitting next to Mel Brooks on Concorde and telling him how much I loved his film, The Producers, but how much I loved the music in it, which I think absolutely delighted him because he'd written the music himself. And between us, we stood up and we danced up and down the Concorde from one end to the other, singing Springtime for Hitler and Germany was kicking in the air. I think the other passengers, most of whom were very sort of top upper class people, were slightly shocked by our behaviour. Well, I hope you've enjoyed show 4 of A Victim Bites Back, our second look at Marrakesh. Who knows where the next show will lead? I do hope you'll forgive my slight waffling on, but that's the way it goes.
Ow!